Sarah Mills wiped down the last of the metal tables in the colony cafeteria, her cloth making squeaking sounds against the smooth surface. The morning shift always started early, long before the first students arrived for breakfast. She liked these quiet moments when the large room was empty and peaceful. The overhead lights hummed softly, and through the wide windows she could see the orange sky of New Terrace beginning to brighten with the rising sun. She had worked at the education center for 2 years now. It was a simple job, nothing fancy. She prepared meals, served food, cleaned tables, and made sure the children had what they needed. The pay was not great, but it was honest work. Sarah did not mind. She had always liked being around young people. Their energy and curiosity made her days feel meaningful. The colony of New Terrace was home to many different species. Humans made up most of the population, but there were also Centaurians with their blue skin, tall Venetians with 4 arms, and several other alien races. The galactic community encouraged mixing, they said. It helped everyone learn to get along. The education center reflected this diversity. On any given day, Sarah served meals to children who looked completely different from each other. But some children were more different than others. It was during her 3rd week at the center when Sarah first noticed them. 3 small figures sitting in the far corner of the cafeteria, away from everyone else. They had scales instead of skin, deep green and bronze colors that should have shimmered but looked oddly dull. Their bodies were lean, almost too lean, with long tails that curled around their chairs. Small horns protruded from their heads, and their eyes were large and golden. Draconites. Sarah had read about them in the colony information packet but had never seen one in person before. The 3 children sat together at the same table every day. They never joined the lunch lines. They never ate with the other students. They just sat there, quiet and still, watching the other children with those large golden eyes. Sarah found this strange. All students were supposed to receive meals. It was part of the education program. She decided to ask her supervisor about it. Mrs. Patricia Coleman was a middle-aged human woman who had run the cafeteria for nearly a decade. She was efficient and practical, always focused on budgets and schedules. When Sarah asked about the Draconite children, Patricia barely looked up from her computer screen. "Oh, those 3, Patricia said with a dismissive wave. "They have special dietary requirements. Very expensive supplements and proteins we do not stock." The administration reviewed their case and classified them as non-essential students. Sarah frowned. Non-essential? What does that mean? "It means their species is not a major member of the galactic community," Patricia explained, her fingers still typing. "The Draconites are a minor race. Small population, poor home world, no political influence. The colony has limited resources. We have to prioritize." "But they are just children," Sarah said quietly. Patricia finally stopped typing and looked at her. "Sarah, I understand your concern. But we serve over 300 students here. We cannot customize meals for every single dietary requirement, especially for species that contribute so little to the community. The Draconite parents were informed about this when they enrolled their children. It is not our problem." Sarah wanted to argue, but she could see the conversation was over. Patricia had already returned to her computer, the clicking of her keyboard filling the silence. That afternoon, Sarah watched the 3 Draconite children more carefully. They sat in their usual corner during lunch period. The smallest one, who could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old, kept looking at the other children eating. His stomach made a soft rumbling sound that Sarah could hear even from several feet away. The other 2, slightly older, put their arms around the little one and whispered something in their own language. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. She had seen hungry children before, back on Earth in the shelters where she had volunteered. That look was universal, it seemed. It did not matter if you had scales or skin. Hunger looked the same. She could not stop thinking about them that night in her small apartment. Sarah was not wealthy. Her salary barely covered rent and basic expenses. But she had enough. She had food. She was not going hungry. The next morning, Sarah woke up an hour earlier than usual. She prepared her own breakfast, then made 3 additional portions. Nothing fancy, just protein bars she had crushed and mixed with nutrient paste and some dried fruits. She had stayed up late the night before, searching the colony database for information about Draconite dietary needs. They required high protein and certain minerals. She did what she could with what she had. She packed the food in small containers and brought them to work hidden in her bag. When the cafeteria opened and students began arriving, Sarah kept watching the door. Finally, the 3 Draconite children entered. They walked slowly, their tails dragging slightly on the floor. They headed straight for their corner table as always. Sarah took a deep breath. She grabbed the containers from her bag and walked over to them. The three children looked up at her with surprise when she approached. Up close, Sarah could see just how malnourished they were. Their scales were not just dull, they were flaking in places. Their bodies were thin, showing the outline of ribs and bones. The smallest one had dark circles under his golden eyes. "Hello," Sarah said gently, setting the containers on the table. "I brought you something to eat." The children stared at the containers, then at her, then back at the containers. They did not move. "It is okay," Sarah said, opening one container to show them. "I made it this morning. Should be good for you. High-protein minerals. I read about what draconites need." The oldest one, a female with darker green scales, spoke in hesitant standard language. "Why?" It was just one word, but Sarah heard the confusion and suspicion in it. "Because you are hungry," Sarah said simply. "And I have food. That is reason enough." The three children exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, the smallest one reached out with a shaking hand and took one of the containers. He opened it, sniffed the contents, then looked up at Sarah with those huge golden eyes. "Thank you," he whispered in heavily accented standard. Sarah smiled. "You are welcome. What are your names?" "I am Kreth," the oldest female said. She pointed to the middle child, a male. "This is Sola. And the little one is Pen. Nice to meet you all. I am Sarah." She pulled out a chair and sat down with them. "Go ahead and eat. Take your time." They ate slowly at first, carefully, as if they could not quite believe the food was real. Then hunger took over and they ate faster. Sarah watched them, feeling that twist in her chest ease slightly. This was such a small thing. Just some food she had made at home. But to them it clearly meant everything. Pen finished first. He looked at Sarah with food still on his mouth. "This is good. Very good." Sarah laughed softly. "I am glad you like it." Over the following days, Sarah continued bringing food. Every morning she prepared 3 portions and brought them to the cafeteria. The Draconite children began waiting for her near the entrance. When she arrived, their faces would light up, and they would follow her to their corner table. She learned more about them. Kreth was 10 years old, Sola was 8, and Pen was only 6. Their parents worked in the colony's waste processing plant, long hours for very little pay. The parents left before dawn and came home late at night. They did not know their children were going hungry at school. The children had not told them, not wanting to worry them. Sarah began to see changes in them. After 2 weeks, their scales started to brighten slightly. They had more energy. Pen smiled more often. They started doing their schoolwork better, their teachers reported. But Sarah knew this could not continue forever as just her secret. She was spending nearly a quarter of her salary on the special food ingredients. And she worried about what would happen if she got sick or could not come to work one day. Still, every morning when she saw their faces, she knew she would keep doing it. Some things were more important than money. Some things were just right. She did not know that her small act of kindness was being noticed. She did not know that it would eventually change everything. She just knew that 3 children needed food and she could provide it. That was enough. 6 weeks had passed since Sarah started bringing food to the Draconite children. The changes were remarkable. Kreth's scales now shimmered with a deep emerald green that caught the light when she moved. Sola's bronze coloring had become rich and warm, no longer patchy and dull. Little Pen practically glowed, his scales reflecting hints of gold mixed with the green. But the changes went beyond their appearance. They arrived at the cafeteria earlier each morning, standing by the entrance waiting for Sarah. When they saw her walking up the corridor, their faces would brighten and their tails would swish with excitement. Pen would sometimes run to her, though Kreth would scold him gently about proper behavior. "Aunt Sarah," Pen called one morning, using the title he had started using 2 weeks earlier. The words came out in his language first, then he repeated them in standard. "Aunt Sarah, look. I got top marks on my history test." He held up a tablet showing his score. Sarah's heart swelled with pride. "That is wonderful, Pen. I am so proud of you. Teacher said I wrote the best essay in the whole class," Pen continued, bouncing on his feet. "About the formation of the galactic community. She said my analysis was very smart." Sola came up beside his younger brother. "I got high marks too. In mathematics. The teacher said I have natural talent for calculations." "Both of you are doing so well," Sarah said, handing them their morning meals. She had gotten better at preparing the food over the weeks, learning exactly what nutrients they needed and in what amounts. She had even found a supplier in the colony market who gave her discounts on the protein supplements. Kreth approached more slowly, with the dignity befitting the oldest of the 3. but Sarah could see the happiness in her golden eyes. "Miss Sarah, I wanted to thank you. Not just for the food. For everything. We were failing before. Now we are succeeding. Our parents noticed. They are very happy." "Have you told them?" Sarah asked. "About the food situation at school?" Kreth looked down. "No. They work so hard already. They send money back to our home world to help our extended family. If they knew, they would try to pay for expensive meals here, and they cannot afford it. It would break their hearts." Sarah understood. She had met the children's parents once, briefly. They had looked exhausted, their work clothes stained, their hands rough from labor. They were doing everything they could to give their children a better life. "Well, we will keep doing what we are doing," Sarah said quietly. "Now go eat before class starts." The three children settled at their usual table. But Sarah noticed something new. Other students were starting to join them. A young Centaurian girl sat down next to Kreth, asking her a question about homework. Two human boys asked Sola if he wanted to play ball after school. Penn chatted happily with a Venexian child about a game they both liked. The Draconite children were no longer isolated in their corner. They were becoming part of the community. Sarah was cleaning tables later that morning when Mrs. Coleman approached her with an unusual expression on her face. Behind her stood a tall, thin human man in an administrator's uniform. Sarah recognized him from colony announcements. Director Martin Walsh, the head of the entire education center. "Miss Mills," Director Walsh said in a clipped, professional tone. "We need to speak with you. In private." Sarah's stomach tightened, but she nodded. She followed them to a small office off the main cafeteria. Director Walsh sat behind the desk while Mrs. Coleman stood to the side, avoiding Sarah's eyes. "It has come to my attention," Walsh began, "that you have been conducting an unauthorized feeding program for certain non-human students. Specifically, 3 Draconite children." Sarah said nothing, waiting. "This is highly irregular," Walsh continued. "We have protocols and budgets for a reason. You cannot simply decide on your own to provide specialized meals outside of the approved program." "The approved program was letting them starve," Sarah said quietly. Walsh's expression hardened. "That is dramatic and inaccurate. Their parents were informed of the dietary situation when they enrolled. They made the choice to send their children here anyway. We cannot be expected to accommodate every single species' requirements, especially minor species with no significant standing in the galactic community." "They are children," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Hungry children. And you are using colony resources without authorization," Walsh shot back. "The cafeteria space, the tables, your work time. All of this is colony property and colony time. I am ordering you to cease this unauthorized feeding immediately." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "And if I do not? Then you will be terminated from your position." Walsh stood up. "I understand you may have good intentions, Miss Mills. But we have rules for a reason. We have limited resources and many demands. We cannot set a precedent of employees making unilateral decisions about resource allocation. This ends today. Am I clear?" Sarah thought about the 3 children. She thought about Penn's bright smile and his pride in his test scores. She thought about Kretha's gratitude and Sola's growing confidence. She thought about their parents working long hours in the waste processing plant. "Yes, Director," she said. "You are clear." Walsh seemed satisfied. "Good. Return to your duties." Sarah left the office and went back to work. She finished her shift in silence, her mind working through the problem. When the day ended, she went home to her small apartment and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. The next morning she arrived at work an hour earlier than usual. She brought the food for the 3 children as always, but now she kept it hidden more carefully. When Kreth, Sola, and Penn arrived, she did not meet them in the cafeteria. Instead, she caught their attention and led them to a small storage room near the back of the building. "We have to be more careful now," she told them, handing over the containers. "The director knows. He ordered me to stop. But I am not going to stop. We just have to be smarter about it." Penn's eyes widened with worry. "Will you get in trouble? Will you lose your job?" Sarah smiled and touched his small horned head gently. "Do not worry about me, Penn. I will be fine. Just eat quickly here, then go to your classes as normal. Act like nothing has changed." "Why are you doing this?" Sola asked, echoing his sister's question from weeks ago. "You could lose your job. We are not even your species. We are nobody important." Sarah knelt down to be at eye level with them. "You are not nobody. You are 3 young people with bright futures ahead of you. And I am doing this because it is the right thing to do. That is the only reason I need." The children ate quickly in the storage room, then hurried off to class. Sarah cleaned up any evidence and returned to her normal duties. She acted as if nothing had changed, and to her relief, Director Walsh did not seem to be watching her closely. But others were watching. Throughout the colony, word had begun to spread about the human cafeteria worker who fed alien children with her own money. Other humans found this unremarkable, just typical kindness. But the alien species found it fascinating and puzzling. A Centaurian teacher mentioned it to her colleagues. She gains nothing from this. No status, no payment, no favors owed. She just does it because the children are hungry. Is this normal human behavior? A Venetian administrator discussed it with his family. Among our people we help our own kin, our own clan. But to help another species young? With her own resources? I do not understand the logic. Even the few other Draconites in the colony heard about it. They were surprised and moved. Humans and Draconites had little interaction historically. Their worlds were far apart. They had no treaties or agreements. Yet this human woman helped Draconite children as if they were her own. Sarah knew none of this. She simply continued her routine. Wake up early, prepare food, bring it to the children in secret, go about her work day, go home and prepare for the next day. She was spending nearly half her salary now on the special ingredients and supplements. She had stopped buying new clothes or eating at restaurants. Her apartment was cold because she kept the heating low to save money. But when she saw the children thriving, when Penn called her Aunt Sarah, when Kreth and Sola showed her their improved test scores, it all felt worth it. She did not know that her small act of daily kindness was being observed not just by the colony, but by eyes much farther away. She did not know that the Draconite children's nightly communications with their parents were being monitored by security protocols on their home world. She did not know that someone very important was paying attention to the human woman who fed 3 Draconite young without asking anything in return. She only knew that tomorrow morning she would wake up early again and prepare 3 meals. Because that is what you did for children who needed help. That is what you did when it was right. The alarm started blaring at 3 in the afternoon, cutting through the normal sounds of the cafeteria. Sarah looked up from wiping tables, her heart jumping at the urgent wailing. Emergency sirens were rare on New Terrace. The last time they had sounded was over a year ago during a severe storm. Students began talking nervously. Teachers appeared in doorways, trying to calm the children while checking their own communication devices for information. Sarah pulled out her tablet and opened the colony news feed. Breaking. Collapse at Outer Zone mining facility. Multiple workers trapped. Her hands went cold. The Outer Zone mines. That was where the Draconite parents worked, along with dozens of other low-wage laborers who kept the colony running. She immediately thought of Kreth, Sola, and Penn. Sarah rushed to find them. They were in the main hallway with other students, all being kept inside as a safety precaution. The 3 Draconite children stood together, their scales pale with fear, staring at their tablets. Sarah. Penn ran to her when he saw her, his voice breaking. Our parents? They are in the mine. The mine collapsed. Sarah knelt down and pulled all 3 children close. I know. I just saw the news. But rescue teams will go get them. They will be okay. But even as she said the words, she felt doubt creeping in. She held the children while they trembled, making soft, distressed sounds in their own language. Over the next 2 hours, more information came through. The collapse had been severe. 17 workers were trapped deep underground. The structural damage was extensive. Rescue would be difficult and dangerous. Sarah stayed with the 3 children, sitting with them in a quiet corner while other students were picked up by their parents. Kreth, Sola, and Penn had nowhere to go. Their parents were trapped, and they had no other family on New Terrace. At 5 o'clock, an emergency colony council meeting was called. It would be broadcast live for all residents to watch. Sarah found a screen and turned it on, the 3 children huddled against her. The council members sat at a long table. Director Walsh was there, along with the mining operations director, the financial officer, and several other administrators. They all looked tired and serious. The mining operations director spoke first, explaining the technical details of the collapse. The structural damage was worse than initially thought. A rescue operation would require specialized equipment, additional workers, and extensive resources. Then the financial officer stood up. He was a thin human man with gray hair and cold eyes. He pulled up charts and numbers on the display screen. The cost of a full rescue operation would be substantial, he said in a flat voice. We are looking at a minimum of 200,000 credits for equipment rental, overtime pay for rescue workers, medical supplies, and structural reinforcement. That does not include potential liability costs or long-term medical care for injured workers. There was silence in the council chamber. However, the financial officer continued, we must consider the economic reality. The 17 trapped workers are all employed in low-wage positions. Their combined annual economic output is approximately 150,000 credits. The cost-benefit analysis suggests that allocating 200,000 credits for rescue operations may not be the most efficient use of colony resources. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. She stared at the screen in disbelief. One of the council members, a Centaurian woman, spoke up. Are you suggesting we abandon the rescue operation? I am suggesting we carefully consider our options, the financial officer replied. We have other pressing needs. The education center needs upgrades. Infrastructure repairs are overdue. We have limited resources. We must prioritize. These are living beings, another council member protested. 17 people. 17 low-skill workers who can be replaced, the financial officer said bluntly. I am simply presenting the economic facts. Director Walsh leaned forward. Perhaps we could negotiate with the workers' families. If they could contribute to the rescue costs, we could justify a partial operation. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. She looked down at the 3 children pressed against her. Penn was crying silently. Kretha's face was frozen in shock. Sola was shaking. The council continued debating. Some members argued for full rescue operations. Others worried about costs and budgets. The financial officer kept bringing up numbers and efficiency calculations. They talked about the trapped workers like they were discussing broken equipment, not living people with families and children. Sarah stood up. Stay here, she told the children. I will be back soon. She walked out of the building, her mind clear with purpose. The council meeting was being held in the Central Administration Building, only a few blocks away. Sarah walked fast, her hands clenched into fists. The council chamber had a public gallery where residents could watch meetings in person. Sarah entered and went straight to the speaker's podium, where any citizen could address the council during open sessions. I request permission to speak, she said loudly, interrupting the financial officer mid-sentence. The council members looked at her with surprise. Director Walsh frowned. This is not a scheduled public comment period. I am invoking my right as a colony resident to address the council on urgent matters, Sarah said, her voice steady and strong. She had read the colony charter. She knew the rules. The council president, an older human woman, nodded reluctantly. You have 3 minutes, Miss Mills. Sarah Mills. She stepped up to the podium and looked directly at the council members and the cameras broadcasting the meeting across the colony. I work in the education center cafeteria. Today I am sitting with 3 children whose parents are trapped in that mine. And I just listened to this council debate whether those parents' lives are worth saving based on their economic value. The chamber went very quiet. Let me tell you about economic value, Sarah continued, her voice rising. Those workers you are calculating about? They keep this colony running. They process our waste. They mine the resources we use every day. They do the jobs that nobody else wants to do for wages that barely cover their basic needs. And now they are trapped underground, probably terrified, maybe injured, and this council is discussing whether they are worth the cost of rescue. The financial officer tried to interrupt. Miss Mills, you do not understand the complexities. I understand perfectly, Sarah cut him off. You are putting a price on human lives. On Draconite lives. On the lives of 17 people who have families and children and dreams. You are saying they do not matter enough because they are poor. She pointed at the financial officer. You sit there with your charts and your numbers and you talk about efficiency. But what about basic decency? What about the fact that we are supposed to be a community? If we can afford new furniture for administration offices, if we can afford upgrades for the education center that mainly benefit wealthy students, then we can afford to save 17 lives. Director Walsh stood up. Miss Mills, you are out of order. No, you are out of order. Sarah's voice rang through the chamber. All of you. You are supposed to lead this colony. You are supposed to protect everyone, not just the ones who contribute the most credits. Those workers down in that mine are not numbers on a spreadsheet. They are people. And if we cannot save everyone, if we start deciding who deserves rescue based on their economic value, then we save no one with honor. We become no better than the worst parts of the old systems we supposedly left behind. The chamber erupted. Some people in the gallery started clapping. Others shouted in agreement. Council members argued with each other. The cameras kept recording everything. Sarah's voice cut through the noise one final time. I am going to organize a civilian rescue operation. Anyone who wants to help, meet at the mining facility in 1 hour. We will save those workers ourselves if this council will not do it. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, chaos continued. But Sarah did not look back. She pulled out her tablet and started making calls, sending messages, organizing volunteers. Within minutes, her speech was spreading across the colony network. People shared the video. They commented. They argued. But most importantly, they responded. By the time Sarah returned to the children, messages were flooding her tablet. Dozens of people volunteering to help. Engineers offering their expertise. Medical workers bringing supplies. Regular citizens ready to do whatever was needed. She knelt down in front of Kreth, Sola, and Pen. We are going to save your parents, she said firmly. I promise you. That night, while Sarah coordinated with volunteers and prepared for the rescue operation, the 3 Draconite children did something they had been taught since birth but never thought they would need to do. They went to a quiet room and sat in a circle, holding hands. They closed their eyes and began to hum, a low resonant sound that came from deep in their chests. The hum grew louder, more complex, harmonizing in ways that seemed impossible for only 3 voices. It was an ancient ritual, older than the Draconite civilization itself. A distress call passed down through generations. It used frequencies that traveled beyond normal space, reaching out through dimensions that most species did not even know existed. The children did not know if anyone would hear it. Their people were far away and they were considered unimportant. But they called anyway, pouring all their fear and hope into the ancient song. And far across the galaxy, in a place the children had never seen, someone heard. The civilian rescue operation worked through the night. Sarah coordinated teams of volunteers, people who brought equipment, medical supplies, and determination. Engineers who normally worked on construction projects studied the collapsed mine structure. Doctors set up emergency treatment stations. Regular citizens formed chains to clear debris. Director Walsh and the Colony Council had finally authorized an official rescue operation after Sarah's speech went viral and public pressure became overwhelming. But the civilian volunteers had already started. They were not waiting for permission to save lives. By dawn they had made progress. They cleared several access tunnels and established contact with some of the trapped workers. All 17 were alive, though some were injured. The Draconite parents of Kreth, Sola, and Pen were among them, scared but unhurt. Sarah had not slept. She stood near the mine entrance, her clothes covered in dust, coordinating rescue teams through her tablet. The 3 Draconite children stayed close to her, refusing to leave despite her suggestions that they rest. We want to be here when our parents come out, Kreth said firmly. Sarah understood. She kept them close, making sure they had water and food, while the rescue work continued. It was just after sunrise when the sky changed. At first, Sarah thought she was seeing things from exhaustion. The orange sky of New Terrace seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. Then the rippling intensified and reality itself seemed to tear open. Ships emerged from hyperspace. Not 1 or 2 ships. Dozens of them. Huge vessels that blocked out the rising sun, their hulls dark and massive and covered in markings Sarah did not recognize. They were warships, clearly built for combat, bristling with weapons and armor. Alarms began blaring across the colony. Emergency broadcasts filled every screen and speaker. Unknown fleet detected. All residents take shelter. This is not a drill. Sarah grabbed the 3 children and pulled them close. Around her, people stopped working and stared up at the sky in terror. More ships kept appearing, filling the space above New Terrace until there were at least 50 massive vessels hovering in formation. The largest ship, positioned at the center of the fleet, was enormous. It dwarfed the others, a behemoth of dark metal and power. Sarah could see weapons batteries along its hull that could probably destroy the entire colony in seconds. Her tablet buzzed with an emergency broadcast. Every screen in the colony showed the same thing. A transmission was coming from the fleet. The image that appeared showed the interior of a ship's bridge. And standing at the center was a Draconite unlike any Sarah had ever seen. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, his scales a deep black color shot through with silver. He wore elaborate armor that looked both ceremonial and functional, covered in symbols and decorations that spoke of rank and power. His horns were longer and more curved than those of the children, and his golden eyes burned with fierce intelligence. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, filled with authority that made Sarah's bones vibrate. I am High Admiral Vorith, Supreme Commander of the Draconite Imperial Fleet. We received our children's call. The colony descended into chaos. People ran for shelters. Security forces scrambled to defensive positions, though everyone knew they had no hope against a fleet that size. The Colony Council tried to establish communication, sending frantic messages. But High Admiral Vorith ignored all official channels. Instead, his next message was targeted and specific. "We seek the human named Sarah Mills. Bring her to us immediately." Sarah felt all eyes turn to her. Fear shot through her body. Why did they want her? What had she done? Director Walsh appeared within minutes, surrounded by security personnel. His face was pale with fear. "Miss Mills, the Draconite fleet is demanding you. We have no choice. You must go to them." Little Pen grabbed Sarah's hand. "No. Do not take Aunt Sarah." Kreth and Sola moved in front of her protectively, their small bodies tense. "It is okay," Sarah said, though her voice shook. She had no idea what was happening, but she would not let the children see her panic. "I will go. Everything will be fine." A shuttle arrived to transport her to the flagship. As Sarah walked toward it, she looked back at the three children. They were crying now, calling out to her. It broke her heart. The shuttle ride was short but felt like forever. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Why did a Draconite war fleet come to New Terrace? Why did they want her? What was going to happen? The flagship's hangar bay was enormous, filled with smaller ships and military equipment. When Sarah stepped out of the shuttle, she was surrounded by Draconite soldiers. They were all large and armored, carrying weapons, their faces stern. They escorted her through corridors of dark metal until they reached a massive chamber. The doors opened and Sarah stepped inside. High Admiral Vorith stood at the far end, waiting. Up close he was even more imposing. But Sarah noticed something else too. Despite his fierce appearance, his eyes held something that looked almost like gentleness when he looked at her. "Sarah Mills," he said. His voice filled the chamber. "Do you know who Kreth, Sola, and Pen truly are?" Sarah shook her head, confused. "They are students. Children whose parents work in the colony." "No," Vorith said. "They are members of the royal bloodline. Kreth is third in line to the imperial throne. Sola and Pen are her younger brothers, also of royal blood." Sarah felt dizzy. "What? But their parents work in waste processing. Their parents are members of the Royal Guard, our most elite warriors. 2 years ago there was an attempted coup on our home world. To protect the royal children, we sent them far away, disguised as common laborers' offspring. We chose an insignificant colony where no one would think to look for them. We have agents watching them always, keeping them safe from a distance." Sarah tried to process this information. The 3 hungry children she had been feeding were royalty? But they were starving, she said. If you were watching them, how could you let them go hungry? For the first time, Vorith's expression showed shame. "Our agents' orders were to observe and protect from external threats only, not to interfere with their daily lives. The disguise had to be complete. We did not know about the food situation until recently, when we reviewed their daily reports more carefully. By then you had already begun helping them." He stepped closer to Sarah, and she saw something she never expected to see from a military commander leading a war fleet. His eyes were shining with emotion. "You fed them," he said quietly. "Every day for months. You used your own money. You risked your job. You asked nothing in return. You did not know they were royalty. You thought they were nobody important. And you helped them anyway." Sarah did not know what to say. They were hungry. That is all that mattered. Vorith made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "That is all that mattered to you. But do you understand what you did? You saved the future of our empire. Without proper nutrition, their growth would have been stunted. Their mental development would have suffered. You preserved their health and their futures when we, their own people, failed them through our rigid protocols." He turned and gestured to someone Sarah had not noticed before. An older female Draconite stepped forward, her scales pale gold, wearing robes of deep purple. "This is Matriarch Celine, the grandmother of the children. The current empress of our people." The empress approached Sarah with tears streaming down her face. "You cared for my grandchildren. You gave them food and kindness. You taught them they were worthy of care. How can we ever repay this?" "I do not want repayment," Sarah said, overwhelmed. "I just wanted to help." "Exactly," Vorith said. "You wanted nothing. Expected nothing. This is why what you did is so extraordinary." He stepped back, and to Sarah's complete shock, the massive warrior knelt before her. The empress knelt as well. Then every Draconite in the chamber followed, dropping to one knee. "You saved our future asking nothing in return," Vorith said, his voice thick with emotion. "Draconites do not forget. We honor our debts. From this moment forward, you are kin-friend to the Empire, the highest honor we can bestow on an outsider. Your people are now our allies. Your safety is our priority. And your kindness will be remembered in our histories for 1,000 generations." Sarah stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. "I just fed some kids," she whispered. "No," the Empress said, rising and taking Sarah's hands gently. "You showed compassion across species without thought of reward. You demonstrated that some beings care simply because it is right. In 10,000 years of Draconite history, we have never encountered this so purely. Most species help only their own kind. Others help only when benefit is certain. But you helped our children because they were hungry. Nothing more was needed." Vorith stood as well. "The children sent out the ancient distress call last night. It is only used in the most dire circumstances. When we received it, we thought they were under direct attack. We mobilized our entire home fleet and jumped here immediately. We were prepared for war." He gestured to the viewport where the massive fleet could be seen surrounding New Terrace. "But when we arrived and investigated, we learned the truth. The distress call was sent because their parents were trapped and the colony government was debating whether to save them. And we learned about you. About everything you have done. About your speech to the council." Sarah's tablet buzzed. Director Walsh was sending frantic messages. The civilian rescue operation had successfully brought out all 17 trapped workers while she was on the flagship. The Draconite parents were free and safe. "Your parents are safe," Sarah told the Admiral and Empress. "All the workers were rescued." Relief washed over their faces. "Thanks to you and your volunteers," Vorith said. "We monitored the rescue operation. Your people saved ours when your own government would not." He looked out at the colony below. "Now we will have words with your colony leadership about the value they place on lives." Within hours of the Draconite fleet's arrival, everything on New Terrace began to change. Sarah was returned to the surface in an elegant shuttle, accompanied by High Admiral Vorith himself. The massive warrior insisted on personally escorting her back to the colony. When they landed near the mining facility, a crowd had gathered. The 17 rescued workers stood together, covered in dust and bandages but alive. When the Draconite parents saw the Admiral step out of the shuttle, they immediately dropped to their knees, their heads bowed low. Vorith approached them quickly. "Rise," he commanded gently. "You have nothing to fear. Your children are safe. Your cover is no longer necessary. The threat on the home world has been eliminated." The parents looked up with tears in their eyes. "Our children?" the mother asked, her voice breaking. "Healthy and well, thanks to this human." Vorith gestured to Sarah. "She fed them every day when the colony would not. She kept them strong and safe when we failed in our duty to provide for them properly." The Draconite father stared at Sarah in shock. "You fed our children?" "For months." Sarah felt embarrassed by the attention. "They were hungry. It was not difficult." The mother moved forward and embraced Sarah suddenly, nearly knocking her over. The father joined, and Sarah found herself wrapped in the arms of 2 former royal guards who were crying with gratitude. "Thank you," the mother whispered. "Thank you for caring for them. Thank you for seeing them as worthy of your kindness." Vorith turned to address the entire crowd that had gathered. Humans, Centaurians, Venetians, and other species all watched nervously as the imposing admiral spoke. "The Draconite Empire thanks the civilian volunteers who rescued these workers," he announced, his voice carrying across the area. "You demonstrated courage and compassion. We will not forget this. As a gesture of our gratitude, we are sharing our advanced medical technology with your colony. Our medical ships are already transmitting data to your hospitals." A murmur went through the crowd. Draconite medical technology was known to be centuries ahead of what most colonies possessed. This was an incredible gift. "Furthermore," Vorith continued, "we will be making significant investments in this colony's infrastructure and education. Consider it payment for the care given to our royal family members." Director Walsh pushed through the crowd, his face red and sweating. "Admiral, perhaps we should discuss this in an official capacity, through proper channels." Vorith's golden eyes fixed on Walsh with an intensity that made the director step back. "You are Martin Walsh. The director who ordered Sarah Mills to stop feeding hungry children. The administrator who debated the economic value of rescuing trapped workers." Walsh's face went pale. "I was simply following budgetary protocols." "You failed in your duty to protect all residents of this colony," Vorith said coldly. "You treated beings as expendable based on their economic output. The Draconite Empire does not negotiate with leaders who demonstrate such moral bankruptcy. As of this moment, you are removed from your position." We will be working with the Colony Council to appoint new leadership. You cannot do that. Walsh sputtered. You have no authority over colony governance. We have the authority of a fleet of warships in orbit and significant financial resources we are prepared to invest in this colony, Vorith replied calmly. We also have legal grounds. 3 members of the Draconite royal family were subjected to neglect and discrimination under your administration. We could pursue formal charges through the Galactic Community Courts. Or you can accept removal from your position quietly. Choose. Walsh looked around desperately, but no one came to his defense. Even the other council members avoided his eyes. He had become deeply unpopular after Sarah's speech went viral. Finally, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Over the following days, the Draconite presence transformed New Terrace. Medical teams from the fleet worked with colony doctors, sharing techniques and equipment. Engineers examined the mining facility and implemented safety improvements that would prevent future collapses. Supply ships brought food and resources, distributed freely to workers' families. Vorith personally oversaw renovations to the education center. He walked through the facilities with architects and engineers, planning expansions and improvements. When he reached the cafeteria where Sarah worked, he stopped and stood silent for a long moment. This is where she fed them, he said quietly to his staff. This cafeteria will be completely rebuilt. The finest equipment, the most advanced food preparation systems. Every child who studies here will have access to proper nutrition, regardless of their species or their family's income. Sarah was called to a formal meeting with Admiral Vorith and the Colony Council 5 days after the fleet's arrival. She entered the council chamber nervously, unsure what to expect. The council members all stood when she entered, showing a respect they had never demonstrated before. Vorith stood at the head of the table. Beside him was Empress Celine, who had come down from the flagship specifically for this meeting. The 3 children, Kreth, Sola and Pen, sat nearby with their parents, all dressed in formal Draconite attire that marked their royal status. Sarah Mills, Vorith began. The Draconite Empire wishes to properly honor what you have done for our people. We have made initial improvements to your colony as a small gesture of gratitude. But we want to offer you a personal reward as well. Name anything within our power to grant, and it is yours. Sarah looked uncomfortable. I do not need a reward. I did not help the children expecting anything in return. We know, Empress Celine said warmly. That is precisely why we wish to honor you. Please, there must be something you desire. Well, a position of power? Transport to any world you wish? We can provide all of this and more. Sarah thought for a long moment. She looked at Kreth, Sola and Pen, who watched her with hopeful eyes. She thought about all the other students at the education center. She thought about the workers in the mines and factories, struggling to survive on low wages. I do want something, she said finally. I want a guarantee that every child in this colony, regardless of species, receives proper nutrition. Not just now while you are here but permanently. I want a funded program that ensures no child goes hungry ever again. Vorith nodded slowly. This will be done. What else? Fair wages for all workers, Sarah continued. The people who do the hardest jobs, who keep this colony running, they deserve to earn enough to live with dignity. I want labor reforms that ensure fair compensation. The council members shifted uncomfortably. These were systemic changes that would cost significant resources. But Vorith smiled, a fierce expression of approval. You ask nothing for yourself, he observed. Only for others. I have what I need, Sarah said simply. But there are many here who do not. If you truly want to honor me, honor them by making their lives better. Empress Celine stood and approached Sarah. She took off an ornate necklace she was wearing, a beautiful piece made of precious metals and gems that probably cost more than Sarah would earn in 10 lifetimes. This is a royal medallion, the Empress said, placing it around Sarah's neck. It marks you as kin-friend to the Empire. But more than that, it represents what we have learned from you. We Draconites are an old species. We have existed for thousands of years. We thought we understood honor and loyalty and duty. But you have taught us something new. You have shown us that true compassion asks for nothing. That caring for others does not require blood ties or political alliances or expectation of reward. Vorith stepped forward as well. We have studied many species since joining the galactic community. We have analyzed how different races interact with each other. And we have discovered something remarkable about humans. He pulled up a holographic display showing data and research. Across 47 different documented cases, humans consistently demonstrate cross-species parental care. You adopt orphaned animals. You rescue injured creatures that are not even sentient. You risk your lives to save beings completely unrelated to you biologically. This behavior is nearly unique in the galaxy. Sarah frowned, confused. But surely other species help each other? They help their own kind, Vorith explained. Or species with whom they have alliances and mutual benefit. But humans help simply because another being needs help. You do not calculate advantage. You do not assess genetic similarity. You see suffering and you respond. This is extraordinary. He gestured to Sarah. Most species would never have fed alien children with their own resources, expecting nothing. Most would have walked past, thinking, not my species, not my problem. But you saw hungry children and your immediate response was to feed them. This is the human difference. The council chamber was silent. Even the council members, who had often taken humans for granted since they were the majority species in the colony, looked thoughtful. Your request will be granted immediately, Vorith declared. We are establishing a permanent fund for childhood nutrition programs. Every child in this colony will have access to species-appropriate meals at no cost to their families. We are also implementing labor reforms and wage improvements for all low-income workers. These changes will be legally binding and permanent. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Thank you. No, Empress Celine said firmly. Thank you. You saved our grandchildren. You saved our future. And you showed our entire civilization that we still have much to learn about compassion. Little Pen broke free from his parents and ran to Sarah, hugging her around the waist. Aunt Sarah, will you still have lunch with us? Even though everyone knows we are royal now. Sarah laughed through her tears and hugged him back. Of course, Pen. Every day just like always. Kreth and Sola joined the hug. Their parents watched with grateful smiles. And High Admiral Vorith, the fierce warrior who commanded a fleet capable of destroying planets, wiped away a tear and turned so his soldiers would not see. 3 years had passed since the Draconite fleet arrived at New Terrace. The colony looked completely different now. Where there had once been simple buildings and basic infrastructure, there now stood gleaming structures with gardens and parks. The mining facilities had been rebuilt with the safest technology available. Worker housing had been upgraded to comfortable apartments with proper heating and modern amenities. But the most dramatic change was at the education center. The old cafeteria building had been demolished and replaced with a magnificent structure of glass and light. Above the entrance, carved letters spelled out Mills Hall, in both Human Standard and Draconite script. Sarah stood in the main dining area of Mills Hall, watching the morning rush of students. Hundreds of children from dozens of different species filled the bright, open space. Centaurian children sat with Venexian friends. Human students chatted with Draconites. Species that had barely interacted 3 years ago now learned and played together as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Every child received a meal suited to their specific dietary needs, completely free of charge. The Draconite Empire had funded the program in perpetuity, and other species had contributed as well once they heard the story of Sarah and the 3 royal children. Mills Hall had become famous across the galactic community. Sarah no longer worked as a simple cafeteria employee. She now held the position of Director of Interspecies Student Services, though she insisted on still serving meals most mornings. She liked the direct contact with the children, the simple act of handing them food and seeing their smiles. Miss Sarah. A small voice called out. Sarah turned to see Pen running toward her, though he was not so small anymore. At 9 years old, he had grown tall and strong, his scales a brilliant gold-green that caught the light. Behind him came Kreth and Sola, now 13 and 11 respectively. The 3 royal children visited New Terrace several times a year, always making time to see Sarah. They lived on the Draconite homeworld now, receiving education suitable for their status, but they never forgot where they had been or who had helped them. Aunt Sarah. Pen crashed into her with a hug that nearly knocked her over. He was getting strong. We just arrived this morning. We came for the ceremony. What ceremony? Sarah asked, confused. Kreth smiled, looking elegant in her formal robes. You will see. It starts in 1 hour. Before Sarah could ask more questions, Admiral Vorith entered Mills Hall. He was not in his military armor today, but rather in diplomatic dress. With him was Empress Celine and a delegation of Draconite officials. But there were others too. Representatives from the Centaurian government, Venexian ambassadors, even delegates from the Galactic Community Council itself. What is all this? Sarah asked, completely bewildered. Come with us, the Empress said warmly, taking Sarah's hand. There is something you need to see. They led her to the colony's main assembly hall, which was packed with people. Every seat was filled. Screens showed the gathering being broadcast across the galactic community network. Sarah's confusion grew. Vorith gently guided her to a seat at the front while he and the other dignitaries took positions on the stage. The Empress stepped up to a podium and the crowd quieted. 3 years ago, Empress Celine began, a human cafeteria worker saw 3 hungry children and fed them. It was a simple act. She asked for nothing in return. She did not know they were royal. She just knew they needed help. Images appeared on the screens behind her, showing Sarah from 3 years ago, bringing food to the children in their corner table. That simple act changed everything, the Empress continued. It saved my grandchildren. It brought our empire into alliance with humanity. And it started a revolution in how the galactic community thinks about social welfare and cross-species cooperation. More images appeared, showing the changes that had spread from New Terrace. Other colonies had adopted similar programs. Species governments had reformed their labor laws and child welfare policies. A Centaurian ambassador stood to speak next. The incident at New Terrace, which we now call the Mills Awakening, forced our government to examine how we treated minority species in our territories. We discovered widespread neglect similar to what happened here. We have since implemented comprehensive reforms. Childhood nutrition programs now exist on all 47 Centaurian colony worlds. A Venetian representative spoke after him. Our species prides itself on logic and efficiency. But we realized we had calculated only economic efficiency, not moral efficiency. The human approach, caring first, calculating later, has proven more effective at building stable, productive societies. We were wrong. Humans were right. One by one, representatives from different species stood and described how their governments had changed policies because of what happened on New Terrace. Labor reforms, education improvements, healthcare access, anti-discrimination laws. The ripple effects had spread across the entire galactic community. Sarah sat in shock, unable to process what she was hearing. She had just fed some kids. How had that turned into all of this? Admiral Vorith stepped forward. Today, the Galactic Community Council is announcing a new initiative. The Sarah Mills Cross-Species Welfare Accords. These are comprehensive guidelines for ensuring that all species, regardless of their political or economic status, receive basic standards of care. Every signatory world will guarantee food, education, and fair labor practices for all residents. He looked directly at Sarah. 137 worlds have already signed. More are joining every day. Within a decade, we expect every member of the galactic community to adopt these standards. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah felt dizzy. This could not be real. She was just one person. She had just fed 3 children. But it was real. The evidence was all around her. The policies. The reforms. The thousands of children across the galaxy who now had better lives because her simple act of kindness had shown other species a different way. Kreth, Sola, and Pen came to stand beside her. They had grown so much, but they still looked at her with the same affection they had shown as hungry children in a cafeteria corner. We are training to be diplomats, Kreth said proudly. We travel to different worlds and teach them about what you taught us. That power means nothing without compassion. That the strong must protect the weak, not exploit them. Sola nodded. We call it the human way. Care first, calculate later. Do what is right simply because it is right. Pen grabbed Sarah's hand. You changed everything, Aunt Sarah. You changed us. You changed our empire. You changed the whole galaxy. And you did it just by being kind. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She looked out at the assembly hall, at all these important people from all these different worlds, and she felt overwhelmed. I just fed some kids, she whispered. Exactly, Empress Celine said, overhearing. You saw a need and you filled it. You did not wait for permission. You did not calculate the benefit. You did not ask if they deserved it. You just helped because that is who you are. That is what humans do. And the galaxy is better for it. The ceremony continued with speeches and presentations. Sarah accepted awards and honors that felt surreal. The Galactic Community Council gave her a medal. The Draconite Empire named her an honorary member of the royal family. Various species governments presented gifts and gratitude. Through it all, Sarah felt like she was dreaming. This was not why she had helped. She had not wanted fame or recognition. She had just wanted 3 children to stop being hungry. Later that evening, after the ceremony ended, Sarah returned to Mills Hall. It was quiet now, the students gone for the day. She walked through the empty dining area, remembering how it used to be. The old cramped cafeteria. The lonely corner where 3 malnourished children sat. She heard footsteps and turned to see a small group entering. They were a species Sarah had never encountered before. 4 children with crystalline skin that refracted light in rainbow patterns. They looked nervous and scared, their clothing shabby and worn. A translator device on the wall activated. "We are sorry for intrusion," one of the children said in halting standard. "We are new to colony. Our family just arrived. We heard this place gives food to all children. Is this true?" Sarah looked at them and saw the same desperation she had seen in Kreth, Sola, and Penn 3 years ago. These children were hungry. They were struggling. They needed help. She smiled warmly and walked to the kitchen, pulling out containers and beginning to prepare food. "Of course it is true. You must be hungry. Let's fix that first, then we'll handle the rest." The children's crystalline faces brightened with hope and relief. They sat at a table, and Sarah brought them plates filled with food she had researched quickly on her tablet to ensure it was suitable for their biology. As she watched them eat, Sarah thought about everything that had happened. The fleet, the reforms, the awards, the galactic community accords bearing her name. It all felt distant and unreal. But this, sitting with hungry children and making sure they had food, this felt real. This was what mattered. Not the ceremonies or the fame, but the simple act of caring for those who needed it. "Are you the famous Sarah Mills?" one of the crystalline children asked shyly. Sarah laughed. "I am just Sarah. And you are?" "I am Trell," the child said. "These are my siblings. We are from a small mining world. Our species is not important in the galactic community." "Every species is important," Sarah said firmly. "And every child deserves to eat and learn and grow. That is what this place is for." She sat with them while they ate, learning their names, asking about their home world, making them feel welcome and valued. Just like she had done with 3 Draconite children years ago. Outside, the sky of New Terrace glowed with the lights of orbiting ships. The Draconite fleet maintained a permanent presence now, along with vessels from dozens of other species. The colony had become a symbol of what the galactic community could achieve when compassion guided policy. But inside Mills Hall, Sarah Mills was doing what she had always done. Feeding hungry children. Asking nothing in return. Simply caring because caring was right. And somewhere across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, other people were learning to do the same. One meal at a time. One child at a time. One act of kindness rippling outward forever. The human way. Care first. Calculate later. And change everything without even trying.